9 months pregnant, my husband left me. 19 years later, he came back for my son and regretted. My name is Tatiana, and I am 42 years old. Right now, I am standing in my warm kitchen watching my 19-year-old son laugh with his friends over video call. His smile lights up the room, and my heart swells with pride. But 19 years ago, on a cold December night, I sat alone on the floor of an empty apartment 9 months pregnant, abandoned by the man who swore to love me forever. I used to believe marriage meant forever. I learned the hard way that some men only stay when life is easy. Before we begin this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If you have ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely, hit that like button right now. And if you want to hear how karma found its way back to the man who left me, make sure you subscribe and stay until the end. This journey took 19 years, and trust me, you do not want to miss a single moment. 20 years ago, I was a 22-year-old girl living in a small town in Ohio. My world revolved around a tiny flower shop that my mother had built with her own hands. Mom raised me alone, working sunrise to sunset, arranging roses, lilies, and carnations for every occasion in our community. She taught me that flowers speak when words fail, that a single bloom can mend a broken heart, or celebrate the greatest joys. When cancer took her 2 years before this story begins, she left me that shop and a lifetime of lessons about resilience. Every morning I woke before dawn to open the store. I arranged bouquets while the sun slowly painted the sky, orange and pink through the front window. In the afternoons I walked home along streets lined with maple trees, their leaves turning gold and crimson in autumn. Life was simple, predictable, and sometimes lonely. I missed my mother every single day, but I found comfort in continuing her legacy. Then Derek walked into my life. He came through the door on a Tuesday afternoon in September, a tall man with brown eyes and a nervous smile. He said he needed flowers for his mother's birthday and had no idea what to choose. I asked him about his mother, what she liked, what made her happy. He told me she loved gardening and had a soft spot for anything pink. I suggested pink carnations, explaining they symbolize a mother's undying love. He looked at me like I had given him the answer to some great mystery. The next day he returned. He said the carnations were perfect, and his mother cried happy tears. He bought a small succulent, claiming it was for his office desk. The day after that, he came back for a single rose, insisting it was for a coworker's birthday. By the 4th visit, we both knew he was running out of excuses. On the 5th day, he finally asked me to dinner. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant 3 blocks from my shop. We shared a plate of spaghetti and talked for 4 hours straight. Derek was 25, a junior accountant at a local construction company. He grew up in the next town over, went to state college, and moved back to be close to his parents. He asked about my mother, and I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he reached across the table and held my hand. Over the following months, Derek became my safe harbor. He picked me up after work, fixed the leaky faucet in my shop's bathroom, and surprised me with home-cooked dinners at his apartment. On weekends, we took long walks through the park, shared ice cream cones on summer evenings, and watched old movies at the single-screen theater downtown. He told me I was beautiful when I had dirt under my fingernails from repotting plants. He said my laugh was his favorite sound. 6 months in, he told me he loved me on a snowy December night. We were standing outside my shop after closing snowflakes landing in my hair. He cupped my face in his hands and said, "I never want to spend another day without you." I believed him with every fiber of my being. For the first time since losing my mother, I felt like I was not alone in the world. He proposed 8 months after our first date right there in the flower shop where we met. He got down on one knee between buckets of roses and asked me to be his wife. I said yes, before he even finished the question. We married 2 months later in a small ceremony at the local chapel. His father, Thomas, welcomed me warmly into the family. His mother, Linda, smiled politely but kept a certain distance I could not quite understand. I told myself she just needed time to get to know me. We moved into Derek's apartment, a cozy 2-bedroom space with big windows overlooking a quiet street. I kept running the flower shop, hiring part-time help so I could balance work and married life. Derek continued at the construction company, sometimes working late on big projects. He always had a reason for coming home after dark, and I never questioned it. Why would I? He was my husband, my partner, the man who promised me forever. Looking back, I wish I had paid closer attention to the small signs. After a few months of marriage, Derek started checking his phone more often. He would step outside to take calls claiming it was work-related. He became vague when I asked about his day, but I was so happy, so deeply in love, that I pushed those observations aside. I trusted him completely, and that trust felt sacred. I had no idea that the foundation of my world was already beginning to crack. 6 months after our wedding, I woke up one morning feeling nauseous. At first, I thought it was something I ate, but when the feeling persisted for a week, I bought a pregnancy test from the pharmacy 3 towns over because I was too nervous to be seen buying one locally. The 2 pink lines appeared almost instantly. I drove straight to Derek's office, unable to wait until evening. When I told him we were going to be parents, his face transformed with joy. He lifted me off my feet, spun me around, and told the entire office we were expecting. That night, we chose a name together. If it was a boy, we would call him Ethan, after my grandfather who had passed away when I was young. Derek said it was perfect. For the first 3 months, everything felt like a dream. Derek attended every prenatal appointment, holding my hand during ultrasounds, gasping when we first heard the heartbeat. He bought stacks of parenting books and read them aloud to me before bed. He rubbed my feet when they swelled and made midnight runs to the grocery store when I craved pickles and chocolate ice cream. I had never felt more loved or more certain that I had made the right choice in marrying him. I hired additional help at the flower shop because standing all day became too difficult as my belly grew. Margaret, a kind woman in her mid-30s who had recently moved to town, became my right hand. She had a gentle spirit and a talent for arrangements that rivaled my own. We became fast friends, sharing lunch breaks and stories about our lives. But something shifted when I entered my 4th month. Derek started traveling for work more frequently. He said the company had landed a major contract in Columbus, and he needed to oversee parts of the project in person. Sometimes he was gone for 3 or 4 days at a stretch. I missed him terribly, but I understood that providing for our growing family required sacrifice. He always brought me back small gifts, a scarf, a book, a box of chocolates, tokens that made me feel remembered. Still, small things began to nag at me. His phone was always on silent mode now, face down on the table. When text messages came through, he would glance at the screen and then excuse himself to another room. I noticed he stopped talking about his workday in detail. When I asked questions, he gave short, distracted answers and changed the subject. One afternoon, while doing laundry, I found a receipt crumpled in the pocket of his dress pants. It was from an upscale restaurant I had never heard of, located 20 miles away in a town we never visited together. The date on the receipt matched a day Derek had told me he was in Columbus for meetings. The total was over $150 too much for a solo business dinner. My hands trembled as I held that thin piece of paper. That night, I asked him about it casually. I mentioned I found a receipt and was curious about the restaurant. His face flickered with something surprise maybe, or fear, before he recovered with a smooth explanation. He said he had taken a potential client to dinner, a real estate developer interested in partnering with the company. It was an important business relationship, he assured me, nothing more. I wanted to believe him. I chose to believe him. But a splinter of doubt had lodged itself in my heart, and no matter how hard I tried, I could not remove it. As the weeks passed, I noticed Derek touching my belly less often. When we discussed nursery colors or debated baby names, his enthusiasm seemed forced. He would look at me and smile, but his eyes were somewhere else entirely. At night, he fell asleep facing away from me, a new pattern that made me feel invisible in our own bed. In my 7th month, something happened that I could not explain away. I woke around 2 in the morning because my back was aching terribly. The bed beside me was empty. I heard Derek's voice drifting in from the balcony, low and hushed. I crept closer to the sliding glass door, not intending to eavesdrop, but unable to stop myself. His tone was different from anything I had heard before. Soft, tender, intimate. "I know," he murmured into the phone. "I miss you too. Just give me a little more time. I promise." My heart stopped. My hands flew to my swollen belly as if to protect the baby from what I was hearing. I stood frozen, unable to breathe, unable to move. When Derek turned to come back inside, I stumbled silently to bed and pretended to be asleep. Tears soaked my pillow as he slid in beside me, oblivious to the storm raging inside my chest. For days afterward, I said nothing. I was terrified that confronting him would confirm my worst fears. Part of me still hoped I had misunderstood, that there was an innocent explanation I had not considered. Maybe he was talking to a family member going through a hard time. Maybe I had heard wrong, but deep down beneath all my desperate rationalizations, I knew something was breaking. I just was not ready to face it yet. The truth arrived wearing my mother-in-law's cold smile. In my 8th month, Linda came to visit. She had never warmed to me in the year and a half since Derek and I married. Her compliments always carried an edge, her questions always probed for weakness. But I tried to be gracious because she was Derek's mother, and family mattered to me more than anything. That evening, we sat together at dinner making awkward small talk over roasted chicken. Then Linda mentioned a name that changed everything. "I ran into Cassandra last week," she said, casually cutting into her meat. "She asked about you, Derek. She looks wonderful. Just made partner at her law firm." Derek's fork clattered against his plate, his face drained of color. I watched him struggle to compose himself while Linda observed us both with an expression I could not read. "Who is Cassandra?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the alarm bells screaming in my head. Linda smiled, that thin, knowing smile of hers. "Oh, just an old friend of Derek's from college. They were quite close once upon a time." That night after Linda left, I could not sleep. I opened my laptop and searched for Cassandra's name along with Derek's. It did not take long to find her. She was beautiful, confident, a successful attorney in a large city 2 hours away. Her social media profile was mostly professional, but I scrolled back through years of posts until I found what I was looking for. A photograph from 3 months ago. Cassandra at an elegant restaurant candlelight, glowing on white tablecloths. The same restaurant listed on the receipt I had found in Derek's pocket. The same date. My world tilted on its axis. The next morning I confronted him. I showed him the photograph, explained about the receipt, asked him directly if he was seeing her. Derek's reaction was not what I expected. Instead of remorse or explanation, he became angry. He accused me of being paranoid, of invading his privacy, of letting pregnancy hormones cloud my judgment. "You have changed since you got pregnant," he said coldly. "You are suspicious of everything I do. I cannot live like this." He stormed out that night and did not come home. I called his phone over and over, but it went straight to voicemail. I sat alone in our apartment 9 months pregnant, wondering how my life had spiraled so far from the happiness I thought we had built together. 3 days later, Derek returned. His demeanor was different, resolved somehow, like a man who had made a difficult decision. He said we needed to talk. I sat on the couch, my hands resting on my enormous belly, and listened as my husband dismantled our marriage with words that cut deeper than any blade. He told me he had reconnected with Cassandra 6 months ago. She was his college girlfriend, the love of his life he thought he had lost. They broke up years ago because she moved across the country for law school, but they never stopped caring about each other. When she returned to Ohio earlier this year, they met for coffee. One coffee became dinner. Dinner became more. "I thought I was over her when I married you," Derek said, unable to meet my eyes. "But I was wrong. I still love her. I have always loved her." I asked about the baby. Our baby. The child I was about to bring into the world any day now. Derek was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his words destroyed whatever remained of my faith in him. "I do not think I am ready to be a father," he said. "This baby, this was a mistake. I am sorry, Tatiana, but I cannot do this. I do not want this responsibility." I stared at him, trying to comprehend that the man I had trusted with my entire heart was telling me he wanted nothing to do with our child. The baby kicked inside me at that moment as if protesting his father's rejection. I placed my hand over the movement, silently promising my son that I would never abandon him the way his father was abandoning us both. Derek packed his belongings that same night. I watched from the couch, numb with shock, as he folded shirts and gathered toiletries. He moved efficiently, like someone who had been planning this for a while. He said he was moving to the city to be with Cassandra. He said his lawyer would send divorce papers. He said I could keep the apartment and everything in it. I begged him to reconsider. Not for me, I told him, but for the baby. Our son deserved a father. Did 19 years of his life mean nothing? Would Derek really walk away from his own flesh and blood? "You are strong," he said, pulling his suitcase toward the door. "You will be fine without me." Then he was gone. The moment the door closed behind him, a searing pain ripped through my abdomen. Contractions. The stress had sent me into labor 3 days before my due date. I managed to call Margaret, my voice barely holding together. She arrived within 20 minutes and drove me to the hospital. I gripped her hand through every contraction, focusing on her calm presence instead of the chaos Derek had left behind. She stayed with me through 18 hours of labor, encouraging me, wiping my forehead, telling me I was the strongest woman she knew. Ethan was born at 4:17 in the morning, weighing 7 pounds and 11 ounces. He had dark hair and the tiniest fingers I had ever seen. When the nurse placed him on my chest, I cried harder than I had cried in my entire life. Joy and grief mixed together until I could not tell them apart. My son was here, perfect and beautiful, and his father would never know what he had thrown away. I came home from the hospital 3 days later to an empty apartment. Derek had returned while I was giving birth and removed every trace of himself. His clothes, his books, his awards from work all gone. He left behind a manila envelope on the kitchen counter containing divorce papers and a single note that read, "I am sorry. Please do not contact me." Those first weeks alone with Ethan were the hardest of my life. I had no family, no parents or siblings to help carry the load. Margaret stopped by when she could bring in groceries and holding Ethan so I could shower. But most hours it was just me and my baby in that silent apartment, learning how to survive together. Money became tight immediately. I had closed the flower shop during my final month of pregnancy and could not reopen with a newborn who needed constant care. My savings dwindled as bills piled up. I sold furniture, clothes, anything I could spare. Some nights I ate crackers for dinner so I could afford formula and diapers. Sleep became a distant memory. Ethan woke every 2 hours demanding to be fed, changed, or simply held. I walked circles around the living room at 3 in the morning, bouncing him gently, singing lullabies my mother used to sing to me. My body ached, my mind fogged, but every time I looked at his face, I found the strength to keep going. 2 months after Derek left, I received an unexpected visitor. Thomas, Derek's father, appeared at my door one afternoon. He looked older than I remembered, his shoulders stooped with what seemed like shame. He asked if he could see his grandson. I let him in, too exhausted to turn away anyone offering kindness. He held Ethan carefully, tears welling in his eyes. He apologized repeatedly for his son's behavior. He said he raised Derek better than this, that he could not understand how his boy could abandon his own child. Linda, he explained, supported Derek's decision. She believed Cassandra was a better match, and that Derek deserved happiness. Thomas disagreed but felt powerless to change anything. Before leaving, he pressed an envelope into my hands. Inside was $2,000 in cash. He said it was not much, but he wanted to help however he could. He promised to visit Ethan whenever possible, though he would have to keep the visit secret from Linda. I accepted the money because I had no choice. Pride could not feed my baby or pay the electricity bill. 2 weeks later, I saw on social media that Derek and Cassandra had married. The wedding photos showed them beaming at each other in front of a grand hotel ballroom. Cassandra wore a designer gown. Derek looked happier than he ever looked with me. I stared at those images until my eyes burned. Then I deactivated my account and deleted every trace of my old life. From that moment forward, there was only me and Ethan. We were our own family now, and I would build a life worthy of the incredible little boy sleeping in my arms. The decision to transform my life came on a random Tuesday morning when Ethan was 6 months old. I was changing his diaper when he looked up at me and smiled for the first time. Not gas, not a reflex, but a real smile that crinkled his eyes and showed his tiny gums. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized I had spent months drowning in grief and survival mode. My son deserved more than a mother who was merely existing. He deserved a mother who was thriving. That afternoon, I called Margaret and asked if she would be willing to manage the flower shop while I rebuilt the business. She agreed immediately, having wondered when I would be ready to come back. We developed a plan together. I would handle administration, marketing, and big picture strategy from home while caring for Ethan. She would run day-to-day operations. We would split profits fairly and grow the business together. I enrolled in online courses about small business management during Ethan's nap times. I learned about accounting, marketing strategies, customer retention, and scaling operations. At night, after Ethan fell asleep, I worked on a business plan to expand our services beyond simple bouquet sales. I researched wedding planning trends and corporate event needs. I saw an opportunity that our little shop could fill if we positioned ourselves correctly. Within a year, we had added wedding floral design to our offerings. I created a portfolio of sample arrangements partnered with local wedding planners and advertised in bridal magazines. Our first wedding client was a young couple who found us through a friend of a friend. They wanted a rustic outdoor ceremony with wildflowers and greenery. Margaret and I worked 16-hour days leading up to that event, arranging hundreds of stems until our fingers cramped. When the bride cried happy tears seeing her ceremony space, I knew we had found our path. Word spread quickly. More weddings followed, then corporate events, galas, and fundraisers. By the time Ethan started kindergarten, our little flower shop had transformed into a full-service event floral company. I hired 2 additional designers and rented warehouse space to accommodate larger projects. The revenue allowed me to buy a modest 2-bedroom house on a quiet street with a big backyard where Ethan could play. Raising Ethan remained my highest priority through all the business growth. I attended every school event, coached his little league team one season, and helped with homework every night. He grew into a curious, compassionate child who loved science and asked endless questions about how the world worked. When he was old enough to ask about his father, I told him the truth in age-appropriate terms. His daddy had made choices that took him far away, but that had nothing to do with how special and loved Ethan was. I never spoke badly about Derek because I did not want bitterness to poison my son's heart. Thomas visited regularly over the years, always when Linda was busy elsewhere. He built a genuine relationship with his grandson, taking him fishing, teaching him chess, sharing stories about his own childhood. When Ethan was 9, Thomas confided that Derek and Cassandra were struggling. Their marriage had grown strained with frequent arguments and long silences. Derek had been passed over for promotions at work and seemed perpetually dissatisfied. Thomas did not gloat about this news, and neither did I. It simply confirmed what I had long suspected. Running away from responsibility rarely leads to happiness. The flower business continued expanding throughout Ethan's childhood. By the time he entered high school, we had 3 locations across the region and employed over 20 people. Local newspapers wrote articles about my journey from abandoned single mother to successful entrepreneur. I was invited to speak at women's business conferences, sharing my story with others who faced seemingly impossible odds. Each speaking engagement reminded me how far I had come and how much further I could still go. Ethan flourished alongside the business. He excelled academically, particularly in biology and chemistry. He volunteered at the local animal shelter every weekend, showing the same compassion for creatures that he showed for people. When he turned 16, he got his first job at a pharmacy, fascinated by medicines and how they helped people heal. He told me he wanted to become a doctor, and I believed with absolute certainty that he would achieve that dream. The summer before his senior year, Ethan received early acceptance to one of the top medical schools in the country. A full scholarship covered tuition, room, and board. When the acceptance letter arrived, I held it in trembling hands, tears streaming down my face. My baby, the child his father rejected before he even drew breath, was going to be a physician. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt had led to this triumph. Thomas cried when we told him the news. He said he had never been prouder of anyone in his entire life. He also mentioned quietly that Linda had passed away 2 years prior after a sudden stroke. The news had reached me through local obituaries, but I had not attended the funeral out of respect for complicated feelings. Still, I sent flowers to the service pink carnations, because even people who hurt us deserve grace in death. As Ethan prepared to leave for college, I found myself reflecting on the life I had built. At 42, I was healthier and happier than I had been at 22. I had wonderful friends, a thriving business, and a son who made me proud every single day. I had even started dating again, cautiously enjoying dinners with a kind man named Richard, who owned the bookstore downtown. Life was not perfect, but it was beautiful in ways I never could have imagined 19 years ago. I had no idea that the past was about to knock on my door demanding things it had no right to ask for. It was a Thursday afternoon in late September when my receptionist buzzed my office line. "There is a man here to see you," she said, her voice uncertain. "He says he is an old acquaintance. His name is Derek." The name hit me like a physical blow. I had not heard it spoken aloud in years. I had not seen Derek since the night he walked out of our apartment, leaving me pregnant and alone. For a moment I considered telling my receptionist to send him away, but curiosity won over caution. After 19 years, I wanted to know what could possibly bring him back. I walked into the lobby and stopped short. The man standing near the entrance was barely recognizable. Derek had aged decades in the span of 19 years. His hair had turned mostly gray, thinning at the temples. Deep lines carved his face, and his once athletic frame had become gaunt and frail. He leaned slightly on a cane, his posture hunched as if carrying invisible weight. The confident, careless man who abandoned me had been replaced by someone who looked defeated by life. "Tatiana," he said, his voice cracking. "Thank you for seeing me." I led him to a private conference room without speaking. I sat across the table from him and waited, keeping my expression neutral. He fidgeted with his hands, unable to meet my eyes directly. Finally, he began talking. He told me about his life since leaving. The early years with Cassandra were good, he admitted. They had money status, a beautiful condo in the city. But problems emerged quickly. Cassandra worked constantly and expected Derek to match her ambition. When he failed to advance in his career, she grew disappointed, then resentful. They argued about everything and agreed on nothing. After 10 years, she confessed to an affair with a senior partner at her firm. The divorce was brutal and expensive. Derek's career collapsed in the aftermath. He lost focus, made poor decisions, and was eventually laid off during a company restructuring. Investments he made during better times failed, spectacularly draining what remained of his savings. He moved from the city back to our small town, living in a cramped studio apartment and working odd jobs to pay rent. Then his health failed. Doctors diagnosed him with chronic kidney disease 3 years ago. The condition worsened steadily despite treatment. 6 months ago, his nephrologist delivered devastating news. Derek needed a kidney transplant. Without one, he had perhaps 2 years left to live, maybe less. I listened to all of this without comment. Part of me felt something resembling sympathy. No one deserves to suffer, even those who have caused suffering. But a larger part of me remained guarded, sensing that this story was leading somewhere specific. Derek finally arrived at his point. "I want to see Ethan," he said, looking at me directly for the first time. "I want to meet my son." I asked him why now, after 19 years of complete silence. No birthday cards, no child support, no phone calls. Why did he suddenly want to be a father? Derek hesitated. His gaze dropped to the table. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Biological relatives have the highest chance of being compatible donors," he said. "My doctors suggested I reach out to family members for potential matches." The words hung in the air between us. I understood immediately what he was asking. He had not come back because he regretted abandoning his son. He had not come to apologize to make amends to build a relationship. He came because he needed Ethan's kidney. I stood up slowly, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. "Let me make sure I understand," I said, my voice calm despite the fury building inside me. "You left me 9 months pregnant. You told me you wanted nothing to do with your own child. You did not send a single dollar to help raise him. You did not call once in 19 years. And now you show up because you need his organs," Derek tried to speak, to explain, to justify. But I was not finished. "Ethan is not a spare parts warehouse for the father who rejected him. He is an extraordinary young man who succeeded despite you, not because of you. I raised him alone. I worked 18-hour days while he was a baby. I sacrificed everything to give him opportunities. And you have the audacity to come here asking for his kidney." Derek slumped in his chair, whatever hope he had brought now draining away. "I know I do not deserve anything," he said quietly, "but he is my last chance. Please, Tatiana, just let me meet him. Let me explain." I told him I would think about it. Then I walked out of that conference room and did not look back. That evening I sat Ethan down in our living room and told him everything. I explained that his biological father had returned after 19 years and wanted to meet him. I told him about Derek's illness, his failed marriage, his broken life. I made clear what Derek actually wanted. Ethan listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I already know about him," Ethan finally said. "I looked him up years ago. I saw his divorce announcement, his business failures, everything. I knew he was sick before you told me." I asked why he never mentioned any of this. Because he did not matter, Ethan replied simply. You are my parent. You raised me. You were there for every scraped knee, every science fair, every heartbreak. He was just a stranger who happened to share my DNA. Still, Ethan agreed to meet Derek once, not for reconciliation, not to consider donation, simply because he wanted to look his biological father in the eye and say what he needed to say. I arranged the meeting at a coffee shop downtown. I sat several tables away, close enough to intervene if necessary, but far enough to give them privacy. Derek arrived early, looking nervous and hopeful. Ethan arrived precisely on time, confident and composed in ways that made my heart swell with pride. They talked for nearly an hour. I could not hear their conversation, but I watched their body language carefully. Derek leaned forward, animated, gesturing frequently. Ethan sat back, listening, nodding occasionally, revealing nothing. At one point, Derek reached across the table as if to take Ethan's hand. Ethan pulled back, maintaining the distance between them. Finally, Ethan stood. He said something brief, and Derek's face crumbled. My son walked toward me, his expression peaceful. What did you tell him? I asked as we left the coffee shop together. The truth, Ethan said. I told him I do not hate him. Hate requires emotional investment, and he has not earned that from me. I told him I am not going to donate anything to him because I have no obligation to someone who chose to walk away before I was born. And I told him that if he wants to find help, he should look to the people he chose over me 19 years ago. Derek remained seated at that coffee table long after we left. When I glanced back through the window, I saw him staring at the door, shoulders shaking, finally, understanding the full weight of what he had thrown away. 3 months later, Thomas called to say Derek had found a kidney donor through the National Registry. The transplant surgery was successful, but Derek remained alone. Cassandra had remarried years ago and wanted nothing to do with him. His few remaining friends had drifted away during his years of decline. He survived, technically, but he lived in isolation, haunted by choices that could never be undone. Karma did not strike Derek down with dramatic vengeance. It simply showed him the natural consequences of abandonment. He lost 19 years with an incredible son who became a remarkable man. He lost the chance to watch Ethan grow up, to teach him to ride a bike, to attend his graduation, to be called Dad. Those moments were gone forever, given instead to me and to Thomas, and to the community that embraced us when Derek walked away. That was the price of his choices, and it was a price he would pay for the rest of his life. 6 months have passed since Derek reappeared and vanished again from our lives. I sit in my garden on this quiet Sunday morning, watching hummingbirds hover near the feeders Ethan helped me install last summer. Pink carnations bloom along the fence, the same variety I recommended to a nervous young man in my flower shop over 2 decades ago. Life moves in circles, sometimes bringing us back to where we started, but transforming us completely along the way. Ethan calls me every evening from medical school. He is thriving there, making friends, excelling in his studies, already talking about specializing in nephrology. The irony is not lost on either of us. He wants to help people with kidney disease, perhaps, because he saw firsthand what desperation looks like when someone waits too long to take responsibility for their own life. He will be an extraordinary physician, bringing both skill and compassion to patients who need both. Richard and I have grown closer these past months. He proposed last week quietly in the back garden of his bookstore, where we shared our first kiss. I said yes. At 42, I am learning that love does not have expiration dates. It simply waits until we are ready to receive it fully. Richard knows my entire history, every heartbreak and triumph, and he loves me. Not despite those experiences, but because of who they shaped me to become. Thomas still visits regularly. He adores spending time with Ethan during school breaks, and he has welcomed Richard into our unconventional family with genuine warmth. We never discuss Derek anymore. There is nothing left to say about a man who made himself irrelevant through his own choices. People sometimes ask me if I have forgiven Derek. The question used to bother me because it implied I owed him something. But I have come to understand that forgiveness is not about the person who hurt you. It is about freeing yourself from the prison of resentment. I released my anger toward Derek years ago, not because he deserved grace, but because I deserved peace. Carrying bitterness would have poisoned my own happiness, and I refused to give him that power over me. What I learned from this journey is that our worth is never determined by who stays or who leaves. Derek's abandonment felt like a death sentence when it happened. I thought I needed a husband to be complete, that my child needed a father to be whole. But Ethan grew into an incredible person without Derek's involvement, and I became stronger than I ever knew possible. The people who truly love us do not make us earn their presence. They simply show up consistently through every storm and every celebration. I also learned that consequences are patient. They do not always arrive immediately or dramatically. Sometimes they unfold slowly over decades, revealing themselves only when enough time has passed to see the full picture. Derek spent 19 years building a life that ultimately collapsed around him, not because of bad luck, but because he built it on a foundation of selfishness and broken promises. The karma was not punishment from the universe. It was simply cause and effect, choices and outcomes, seeds and harvests. Most importantly, I learned that healing is not a destination, but a practice. There were years when I still cried about what happened, moments when loneliness threatened to overwhelm me. But I kept showing up for Ethan, for my business, for myself. I found small joys and celebrated them. I accepted help when it was offered and learned to ask for it when it was not. Slowly, the wounds closed, and eventually all that remained were scars that reminded me how much I could survive. If you are watching this, and you have been abandoned, betrayed, or left to carry burdens alone, please hear me. The pain you feel right now is real and valid. You are allowed to grieve what you lost and what was taken from you, but you are also capable of building a life more beautiful than anything you can currently imagine. It will take time. It will take help from people who genuinely care about you. It will take courage to believe you deserve good things, even when evidence seems scarce. But you can do it. I promise you can do it. Because 19 years ago, I was 9 months pregnant, sitting on the floor of an empty apartment, convinced my life was over. And today, I am surrounded by love, success, and peace that I created with my own 2 hands. You are stronger than you know. You are more valuable than anyone's decision to leave could ever diminish. And your story is far from over. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had someone walk out on you when you needed them most? How did you find the strength to rebuild? Share your story in the comments below, because your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need a reminder that